And we are getting ready for our lipedema patient roundtable, and we know that our guests are showing up as we look. I see the participant numbers going up, up, up. They are so excited to meet some of the people that have shown a light of hope for them as they are on their own lipedema journeys. I'm just going to give us a minute to get everybody up to speed and get everybody logged on, and then we will begin our conversation with, again, four of probably the greatest ladies I've had the chance to meet in recent years, who have shared their hearts, their message, their struggles, and they are all about what they have learned, sharing it with other people so that their journey can be easier. And that's what I admire so much about these lipedema ladies. We're continuing to have people log on, so I'm just going to say a few bits of housekeeping here. This will be recorded, and we will post it on YouTube, and I'll give everybody that's a participant here the link so that you can watch it afterward. I know that there's going to be lots of great information. You may want to review it over and over again. We thank you so much for registering and being here, and we'll stay in touch with you afterward for sure. And with that, I am going to start by saying hello. I'm Brenda Viola, and I work for a company called Medical Solutions Supplier. We carry a product called Lympha Press Optimal Plus, which is indicated by the FDA. In fact, the only device indicated by the FDA for the treatment of lipedema. We're not going to talk about that tonight because as I discovered that we treated lipedema, I thought, gee, I really need to find out about it. So I did what all of you do. Dr. Google, and I started to find out and found different pockets and communities of people that were all leading the way about this condition, which affects about 11% of all women and yet is largely undiagnosed. So that's an issue in itself. In fact, I'm going to launch a poll right now and ask all of you who are weighing in here to weigh in. Have you been diagnosed, literally diagnosed with lipedema, or do you just think you have it from what you've seen online? So while you're answering that question, I want to introduce our wonderful panelists tonight. The very first woman I met on my lipedema journey of discovery was Patty Cornute. And Patty, I'll let her tell you her story, but what inspired me most is there was a time when she couldn't even walk to her mailbox, and now she's running triathlons. She is an amazing force. Her group is called Lipedema Fitness. Wave to us, Patty. We are so glad you're here. I want you to talk in a minute, but I want to go around and introduce everybody. Okay, there's a hush in the crowd. I can feel it because Cara Cruz is here. And when I first talked to Patty, she said, you've got to follow Pale Ginger Pear on Instagram. So I did, and I'm like, oh, she's a star. And here she is with us today. Oh, you've got to follow her on Instagram. Pale Ginger Pear, also known as Cara Cruz. Thank you for being here, Cara.
Thank you.
And I'm going to jump to Cheryl Skolich, who was the next person I met, because I found this Facebook page about food intolerances in lipedema, and I said, huh? And she was nice enough when I reached out to her to say, well, yeah, let's talk. And next thing you know, I was taking a food intolerance test, and you won't believe what I can't tolerate, stuff that I've been eating all my life. We'll talk to Cheryl in a minute. And then I met Susie through Cheryl's page, and Susie is all about quality of life, and lipedema living is all about her story and her daughter's story. It is a message of hope. She has traveled even to Germany to find answers for her condition. Hi, Susie. So wonderful to have you here today as well. All right, ladies, I want you each to give your elevator pitch of what you're all about so our audience knows what kind of questions they can ask of you. Patty, can you go first and tell us about Lipedema Fitness?
Yes. So when I was first diagnosed in 2007, we were all told not to exercise, and we all listened, and I continued to get worse and worse and worse. And finally in 2013, I asked my husband, who's a martial artist and a CrossFit instructor, to help me get back to my mobility. And as you said, I could not walk the length of my driveway. I could barely stand up. So just by training with him, little by little, I could see improvement. I regained my mobility. I got stronger in my core, and I felt better. You know, one, physically I felt better, but emotionally I felt better because I felt like I was doing something. I wasn't just being a victim of this condition, which is easy to do because it is a beast. But as I started to improve, I wanted to tell everybody. So I started talking about fitness, and people were still scared at that time because they were still being told not to do it. So that's how Lipedema Fitness got started. I wanted to start a blog and talk about what I was doing. And then I started a Facebook group specifically for the fitness side, where anybody else who wanted to talk about this crazy fitness thing that we were doing and not supposed to be could
And
come and join it.
interestingly, there's been more than a few. How many followers do you have now?
On the Facebook group, we're just over, I don't know, 6,200.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
And it just started with a passion to share what you had learned, which is awesome. And people can find it on Facebook at Lipedema Fitness.
Yep, there's two. There's a support group for people with lipedema only. And then there's a public page as well where other people can go, like your family members or your physical therapist and stuff.
Or
like
people like me.
Yes.
People like me who want to hear all the latest that's going on. Patty, thank you for that brief overview. The Reader's Digest version of what you're doing. I want to go to the woman you said you've got to see her on Instagram. Pale Ginger Pear, how did you happen?
So I actually found out about lymphedema first. I had fallen my senior year of high school and injured my leg. And then it wasn't until a whole 8 years later, when I was pregnant with my son, that I finally got a doctor to be like, oh yeah, you have lymphedema. So I started with that, and it was 4 years into my journey of lymphedema that I was complaining to the physical therapist about how I was tired of being told just to lose weight and that nothing was taking it off my hips or thighs. And she didn't even look up from her paperwork. She was just like, oh, you won't lose it. You have lipedema. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, oh, it's a special fat. And it was like so casual to her that I was like, wait a minute here. So it was a mixture of being angry that I had never been told this was a thing, to excited that I finally had an answer and wasn't crazy, that what I was doing wasn't doing anything. And it just went from there. I started my Instagram on a dare with the ex that he thought I would have a ton of followers. I thought he was crazy. But this is one of the few times I will say that he was right. And it started more as plus size fashion, because I was all about embracing who you are, how you are, and put on the little black dress, put on the compression, go out. If they don't want to be seen with you, they're not worth being seen with you. And so I just started it from there.
Drop the mic. That was a powerful statement right there. And I could see all the nodding around the table here, sort of like, yeah, we get it. We understand. Can you say that sentence one more time? Because what a great takeaway that is.
If they're not willing to be seen with you, they're not worth being seen with you.
I love that. We're going to get more back to you. That's a great message you have embraced. And this concept of really just loving yourself, it resonates with everybody. I think we all need a good heavy dose of that. Our poll, 100% of the people that are on this webinar tonight have been diagnosed with lipedema.
Wow.
Carol, that's shocking to me, because when I talked to you, it was like, how long did it take for you to get diagnosed?
Well, I first heard about lipedema when I was 50. So that was a really long time not to be diagnosed at all. And then after I heard about it, I needed to do some research and try to find someone. And it took me another good 8 months. And one of the only reasons that I ended up getting a diagnosis was I was trying to get into a clinical trial. And so I had to have a formal diagnosis to get into that trial.
So once you got into oh, I'm sorry, did I cut you off there?
Oh, no, the message popped up with how many people were diagnosed. So good to see
There you
that.
go. See, technology, deer in the headlights. I had a deer in the headlights moment. Sorry about that. So go ahead, continue what you were saying.
So I guess my message when I was diagnosed and heard about lipedema, the message at the time was, well, diet and exercise, they don't help at all. So I thought back through my lifetime and I went, well, that doesn't really ring true to me, because there have been times when I would have been able to lose weight. And so I took a look at some of the plans that had worked for me, and I realized that a lot of them seemed to remove most of the common allergens. And so that got me thinking. And so basically my theory is that lipedema might be an autoimmune disease. And if we're able to cut out our food intolerances, then we might be able to control our lipedema. And I was successful in losing 7 dress sizes by trying to find those intolerances and try to control. Yeah.
All right. Can you please tell the scallop story?
Yes. Okay. So I was on an elimination diet, and I knew at the time that I had thyroid disease. And one of the items that they said was just wonderful for the thyroid was scallops. And I went, scallops? I'm not really excited about scallops. So I actually drove an hour to get to a market that sold scallops that didn't have preservatives and nothing and blah, blah, blah. And drove all the way back, cooked them up, and overnight I gained 6 pounds and I was sick for 5 days. And I went, I think I might be intolerant to scallops. And, you know, I'm asking people and talking, and people are going, well, you're not allergic to any other shellfish. That doesn't make any sense. It can't be, blah, blah, blah. And so I was visiting my aunt. And so we went to a fish restaurant, and, you know, it was all fresh caught fish and blah, blah. And they had some scallops in the pasta that I ordered. So stupidly, I tried it again. And again, yeah, 6 pounds overnight.
I'm sure you were thinking, come on, scallops, that couldn't be. And then it happened again.
Yes. I mean, a scallop is 35 calories. So how can you gain 6 pounds from 35 calories? It's just not logical. But I tell you, the more stories I hear from our Facebook groups, the more I realize that we all have these really, really crazy stories that no one is ever going to believe. And so we're finding those common threads that we all have these wild stories that just make no medical sense at all.
And it's so comforting to hear someone else tell your story and you're like, oh yeah, I can relate to that. How can people find your Facebook page again, Cheryl?
Sure. It's lipedema and food intolerances, a missing link, alkaline and AIP, because at the time, the alkaline and AIP diets I was playing around with.
Okay. So if they just Google that or search it on Facebook, they'll find you. So we just gave a thumbnail sketch. I'm going to launch another poll before I go to Susie. And I want all of you panelists, you can answer the question too. If you have, and we know you do have, or think you have lipedema, what is the biggest challenge you face? Is it pain? Is it mobility? Is it body shaming from self and others? Is it mental health? Or is it just simply shopping? I think that these are some of the common themes that I've heard from people, and the poll will stay open while I go to you, Susie. So I met you and I was so inspired by the beautiful photo of you and your daughters who also have lipedema. Tell us why you started Lipedema Living.
Well, actually, the funny part of it is I was on Instagram and I came across a woman who I could tell right away she had lipedema, but I couldn't tell from her profile whether she knew she had it. And she had over 1 million followers. And I had this thought, I wonder what it would be like when I didn't know what I had, if I had seen somebody like her. Mm-hmm. Like how would that have changed my body image and the way I feel about myself? Mm-hmm. Well, I got this spark, and then I Googled lipedema influencers. And Kara Cruz's article in Inked magazine came right up.
Wow.
And I read it and I was riveted. And then I found her on Instagram and I was like, oh my gosh, look at these people. And then I started finding more and more of these women. And I was like, where have these women been hiding? And how did I not know how to find them? And it was really funny because I had this moment where I was a little bit annoyed, no offense, but I was like, I'm so offended that these women's thighs weren't somewhere where I could see them before. And then I realized that I'd spent my whole life hiding my legs, just like most women with lipedema. And those women who I was annoyed with were me. And I went, oh, we have to change the narrative. We have to start, you know, embracing our curves, going to the beach, showing off that we are who we are. And it started this, and I went, I want to create a website where women with lipedema can find other women that are thriving with lipedema, and they're not letting it define them. And my daughters got really excited because this is genetic. Like, I mean, it can be passed down. It doesn't always have to be, but we have to raise the awareness, and it has to be done in a way that has the light, because there is light. So that was my impetus behind it. And it's just been such a wonderful, it's led me to all these amazing people, and I've been researching like crazy. And
we got a message from Linda Novick. Linda, we are so glad you're out there tonight. She says, it's hard to choose just one on the survey. Maybe a ranking would be better. So let me go around and just jump in. What would you rank as the number one thing? So far in the survey, mobility and body shaming are the number one answer. But what do you think? Have at it, anybody.
For me, sorry. For me, it was hard to pick between pain and mobility, because for me, they kind of went hand in hand. Like, my legs hurt so bad that I didn't want to move. So that was kind of like my combination. I would have said, like, 3 years ago, it would have been like body shaming. I would have hid. I went to college for photography. I was always behind the camera, never in front of it. And it's crazy how that has changed now.
Oh boy, has it changed. That's a great answer. And so, Patty, what were you going to say?
For me, it was mobility and pain as well, but more mobility.
Yeah. So being able to get from point A to point B, that affects your quality of life so much.
It sure does.
So what about you, Cheryl? What's the number one answer for you?
I'd also say mobility. There was a time where I couldn't even stand in the kitchen long enough to cook food. Really just the mobility and being able to do everyday life.
Yeah, for sure. And Susie?
For me, it was mobility before, and I'm not necessarily an advocate specifically for surgeries, but when I went and had my surgeries 7 years ago now, I was at the point where I was probably a year away from being completely immobile, and I could no longer function.
Wow.
So that was pretty significant for me. But now it's the pain factor. I still have the lipedema pain, although the food seems to be handling it.
Okay, so it looks like I am descending from heaven, because big sunshine is coming right into my face, and it's simply because the sun is setting right outside my window. So I'm going to go fix that, and I want us to talk pain. How do you deal with the pain, and what do you recommend to any of our listeners out there while I go fix the sun?
Well, as Susie was just mentioning, I am a big proponent that food intolerances can really impact the pain. I know for myself that if I have egg yolks, then my legs will burn. And there have been other foods as well that will increase the lipedema pain. So, of course, again, just my theory, right? But I do think that there are certain foods that can cause the inflammation, calling the white blood cells to the area, and it starts attacking the nerves, the fat cells, lymph, blood vessels, and etc. So that is one thing that I think can help with the pain.
That's a great answer. And I want to go to you, Patty, because you were told in the beginning you shouldn't be exercising. So do you work through the pain to do your
Yeah.
exercise?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
And at the other end of it, is it better?
It is better. When I first started, some of that was just because I hadn't been working out for, 6 years because we were listening to the advice. So your muscles will start to atrophy if you don't use them. So it was a very slow, very modified, if you're not able to stand, which I really wasn't, I was doing sit-ups on a big yoga ball and I was doing push-ups on the kitchen sink, and it was just a very modified, slow progress. And I immediately started seeing reduction in pain because I used to have the pain that felt like random pinpricks in my legs. You'd just be sitting there and your leg would feel like somebody stuck you with a pin. And that really went away as soon as I started getting mobile again and started moving around.
Wow. So that's
And vibration also helps with the pain a lot when I first started doing the vibration machine.
I'm seeing some nodding. Who else does the vibration machine? Anybody? Yeah? Okay. So tell me about, what do you do, Susie, for pain? I know that you actually went for surgery to deal with it at first. So
Yeah, I had the surgery in 2014. There were a lot of girls there, some of them that might even be on this call. And you couldn't get the surgeries here in the US at that time. At least if you could, we couldn't find them, the surgeons. So we were there and they were actually filming a documentary and a bunch of people were learning about it. So it was pretty fascinating. And it helped a lot, but I was a little bit alarmed when the pain and discomfort, specifically when I had my period, was when I would first notice it, that time of month. And then over time with all the travel, it's gotten worse. But what I found, which actually blew my mind, was when I was searching for Cheryl after I saw her talk at the FDRS conference. And then I was trying to find her, which led me to her group. And then I started experimenting, and I recently eliminated dairy. And my pain factor dropped. Like I was usually averaging, I would say, a 6 on a scale of 10.
wow.
And it's dropped to more like a 4, which I'm a little bit floored by. And then I just started the whole body vibration. And today, weirdly, and I've been doing the swimming in the pool. So I think it's like you tackle it from all angles. But today was the first day that my joint pain was almost negligible because I also have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So it was kind of amazing to me. I was like, wow, this is what I need to be doing. So that was kind of exciting. And I'm constantly still tweaking that on diet stuff because I know that it can cause inflammation. And the reason, and I want to say one thing about this because this is important. Before I went to have my surgeries, I had already been on a whole food, plant-based diet religiously. And I'm talking no sugar, no cheating, no processed foods for 3 years. And I was in so much pain, and I actually went to a plant-based doctor, a medical doctor who's kind of famous in that arena, because I said, I don't know what's going on. It seems like the better I eat, the worse I feel. And it was definitely a food intolerance, which we didn't discover then.
Wow.
He put me on another protocol and the pain did not resolve. And it was a very interesting thing. And I think that it was because I was eating foods that were inflaming my body.
I hear this over and over again. It is a constant process of tweaking, and it's not one size fits all. What may work for one person may not work for the next. The message is resilience. Keep trying until you find what works for you. What about you, Kara, and when it comes to pain? How do you handle
Well, I've been gluten-free for 12 years now. I have celiac disease. So I switched to gluten-free when I was pregnant with my son, because the things that you would eat for morning sickness made me 1,000 times worse. I was like, how is a plain pancake making me this sick? So I had researched again on my own because doctors just kept telling me, oh, just lose weight. And so I researched on my own, figured out that it was celiac, forced for a test, got proof that I was right, and have been gluten-free since. I couldn't really notice other food intolerant issues until I had my first surgery. Now that my lower legs have been reduced of the lipedema. I notice what causes swelling now because I can visually see it. And I'm slightly in denial about dairy. I know I need to give it up. and it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I need to give up dairy as I'm eating a Snickers ice cream bar. You know, it's like, oh, this is what I need to stop. So that is my plan. Being a single mom who has a really tight budget, we're kind of cleaning out what we have in the house so we don't waste it, even if it's not the best for us. And then we're going to start fresh with the next grocery order of better stuff for me, at least. But I do the vibration plate. I swim when I get the chance. Swimming has been a little bit trickier between fresh tattoos and surgeries. I haven't been able to swim as much as I would like to. Some of that I know is self-inflicted, but I do the vibration plate. I do the Lympha Press. So I do a bunch of that. I bribe the kid to massage the feet when he wants money, you know, whatever works.
So I'm loving the conversation. We have some questions coming in from the audience. I do want to say that I want to make sure that you all know we're not giving any medical advice today. We are sharing people's individual lipedema journeys and the things that they have learned. We encourage you to seek medical attention and to seek your own answers. But if we can inspire and give some hope tonight, that's what we want to do. So we had a question from one of our attendees tonight that she doesn't have pain. Is it common that some people don't have pain attached to lipedema? And I'm interested in the answer because I always thought it was called the painful fat disease. So is it possible that pain isn't a part of it?
Yeah, there are a lot of women that don't have it, that also don't have pain. Like even Keto Katrina is a perfect, I call her Keto Katrina because that's her handle on Instagram. But she's one of these women who found out she had lipedema after she lost a whole bunch of weight, but she never had the lipedema pain. And I was so fascinated when I was hearing her story. And there are other people that don't think that they have it. But I want to say one thing. Yeah. There are also, the pain can be something that you've lived with for so long that you think you don't have lipedema pain until it's gone and you go, whoa, have I actually been in this much pain for this long? It's kind of like having a headache your whole life and then suddenly it's gone. You go, oh wow, that's what I had, a headache. And I think that there is that element too.
I think a lot,
go ahead.
I think a lot assume the pain with just being overweight. And they don't realize that other overweight people that don't have lipedema don't have this much pain. I think they automatically just kind of assume, oh, well, I have to be in pain because I'm heavy. No, you're in pain because you have this damaged fat.
That's right.
Wow, that's a really good point. So the M word, menopause. We have a question from one of our attendees. Have any of you experienced menopause? And if so, how did it affect the lipedema? And what did you do that helped? I mean, I don't have lipedema, but I sure have menopause and it's not fun. So does anybody want to speak to how it affects those of you going through menopause, or if you have, or we have a lot of young people here. So, you know, maybe I'm the elder of the bunch, but.
No, I'm in the process of going through it.
Yeah.
Have you noticed anything? Because we understand that there are certain junctures where lipedema is triggered at puberty and pregnancy and then perimenopause. So it's a hormonal kind of trigger. And
Correct.
How does it play out? And what do you do to help?
For me, this past year, like I had my last period in June of last year. And in July, I had a change in my pain in my legs. And I thought it was an IT band issue because I had taken a long train ride. And I'm sure that was probably a combination thereof. But for quite a number of months, I was dealing with severe pain in my legs. Mm-hmm. And I kept having to try different things to work on that. And one of them was magnesium oil spray on the bottoms of my feet. Yeah, that really helped a lot with the pain.
Wow, I think some people, I think I'm taking notes here too. I'd never even heard of magnesium oil spray. Cheryl, you said that you had a little bit of experience with this as well?
Yeah, I had extremely severe hot flashes. I mean, really, really bad. So bad that I bought portable fans so that I'd have them in my pocketbook. I had, you know, a whole variety of things. My endocrinologist did put me on the estrogen patch, so I was very concerned about that because of
Yeah.
all of the talk about, you know, that time period affecting the lipedema. But the patch did work very well for me.
Oh, good. All right. So that's, but that was a temporary situation, or are you still using it?
I stopped the patch about 3 months ago, I'd say.
And have you noticed anything since going off of it?
It still haven't really noticed very much. So
Good.
yeah.
Okay. Good
Yeah.
to know.
So
Anybody
maybe
else want to
some-
talk?
I mean, I'm perimenopausal, and that's when I think my pain got triggered newly. Was because I'm at that point where I'm skipping and then it's like 14 days and there's no prediction and I get the hot flashes and all of that as it's coming. And that was when I noticed that the pain was getting worse. So then it's just more, I think that it really just comes down to also more management of things that cause inflammation. If you keep, like we've been watching all of these amazing webinars with Dr. Herbst, and it does keep coming back to the importance of managing inflammation. And you do that through exercise and diet and compression and, right? So that's been the main thing for me, what's been helping. Now I'm not fully in menopause and I might come back and go, dude, this is much worse. I don't know. I'll let you know.
Yeah, and just as somebody going through it and without lipedema, it's not for sissies. For sure. So we had a message from Nita Cluis, who says menopause equals magnesium glycinate and Emerita progesterone progest cream that's paraben and fragrance free. I guess she's giving us some more advice there from her experience. Sarah Borders wants to ask, how do comorbidities complicate lipedema? And remember, we are not medical professionals here, but does anybody want to speak to Go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, one of the common comorbidities is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And it's a little unsure at the moment whether lipedema might be one of the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome types, and they just haven't separated that group out. Or Dr. Herbst did mention that hypermobility increases as lipedema stage increases. Now, for me, I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I had symptoms of EDS from childhood. So, you know, I might be one of the special cases to be to have that many symptoms with Ehlers. But along with Ehlers-Danlos, some of the other things are mast cell activation syndrome, which is almost unexplained rashes or almost like allergic reactions. The mast cell, which holds histamine, breaks open and releases histamine through the system. And so it's very possible that a lot of us have MCAS syndrome. And so those are some of the common comorbidities.
Wow. Anybody else want to speak to that before I get to some other questions? There's so many interested people out there right now. And there's a question about the frustration of doctors refusing to acknowledge that you have lipedema. So Lisa McCain says, I feel like I'm struggling over here in the UK with doctors just dismissing me and even my own lipedema nurse. What advice, and anybody can jump in on this, what advice would you give to someone who's dealing with that frustration? And I actually feel really for her pain in trying to be acknowledged and recognized and seen.
For me, it was a physical therapist. I went online and found I could find a Lana or a VODR trained physical therapist. And that's how the route I went to get diagnosed. And within minutes, they diagnosed me.
And
That's
what
how
about,
I found out, actually. I was at my Lana physical therapist for my lymphedema, and she diagnosed me. And then I had it confirmed with Dr. Jamie Schwartz when I was out for a consult. My advice is just, you know your body. Fight, fight, fight for what you believe and feel. Because I've been told that every single diagnosis I have, from the celiac, the lymphedema, the lipedema, that I read too much online, and I have proven them wrong every single time. I've kept the stubborn redheadedness going and just fight, because I know that I know my body. I know what I feel. They don't. They're judging by how I look, and I'm going to get my point across. Somebody eventually will listen to me.
yeah, we all went
More
on
of that.
podcast. That was awesome. Susie, did you want to jump in on that?
I was just going to say, we need more of that. I mean, the truth is that there's so many studies and so many places that we can actually verify the information that we can share. And I think it's really, really important that we do that. And lipedema.org is an amazing resource for all kinds of stuff, and can help with that. So, yeah.
Very good. They do have an interactive map where you can put in a location and they will tell you who the local expert is with lipedema. I love this message of don't give up. Be your own advocate. You know, nobody's going to advocate for you like you can. And
right.
Knowing your worth and knowing that you are important and that you are seen is part of what this is all about tonight as well. Cheryl, did you want to talk about the frustration of not being recognized by the medical profession?
I think with every diagnosis that I've had as well, I've had doctors dismiss. I remember before I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I went to a rheumatologist and was trying to figure out what it was. And I said, well, is it rheumatoid arthritis? And so, you know, he did a test and he said, oh, no, that's not it. But he never followed up. And so it was probably a good 6 years later that I was watching a show, Medical Mysteries, I think it was, and they talked about Ehlers-Danlos. And so I went back to him and I said, I think I have Ehlers-Danlos. And so the same type of thing that Kara was talking about, the doctor goes, you can't have that. There's no way you can have that. That's always diagnosed when you're a child, and blah, blah, blah. And so, but then by the end of the appointment, he was testing some of my joints and if they bent backwards or not. And he kind of went, oh, well, yeah, you do have some type of EDS, but you know, it doesn't really matter what type it is. So, so to me, it's just amazing that doctors aren't following up when we're coming with some of these critical issues. And telling us to just go home and manage your symptoms yourself. Well, you know, that's fine to say, but you know, how do you know what supplement to take, and you know, what exercise is best for you, and all of these little things. And I think that's why the lipedema communities that we're all building is so important, so that you can bounce some of those ideas off of each other and see if others have experienced the same thing that you have.
Yeah, in fact, one of the questions that I have in fact, I'll launch this poll right now, which is, are you a member of a lipedema community group, such as a Facebook or another social group? I think, oh my goodness, we've got, so far it's 100%, but we have a couple no's. And so for you no's, I want you to know that every one of these amazing women has a place that you can go to find people just like you and to find the encouragement and the help you need. And I also want to go back to you, Patty, because, you know, you had been told, we were just talking about how the medical community doesn't always recognize you right away. And you were even told not to exercise, but you did anyhow. Now, let me add this caveat. You didn't do it without a trained professional helping you. what was the importance of your husband, who is your trainer, sort of knowing how to direct you? Because I wouldn't want people out there watching to just start something without really good studied wisdom about how to proceed with exercise.
Yeah, for me, it was incredibly important. If you have very limited mobility, the last thing you want is to have an injury. You know, that can take you right out of whatever training you're working towards. So I'm really blessed that he's amazing. He does modifications, we call them mods. And so when I was like, I can't do a push-up, you know, he's like, yeah, you can. We can do that standing in front of the kitchen sink, and you're going to lean forward and you're going to have good form, and you get the same level of technique, just not the same level of, you know, experience or effort, you know, as you would on the floor. You need more muscles and more strength to be able to do that on the floor. And just little by little, you know, now I do push-ups on the floor, whereas when I started, I was on the sink, you know. So it's definitely really important to have somebody who understands bodies. You know, it doesn't have to be, it can be a trainer in a gym, it can be, you know, a physical therapist, it can be somebody that can work with you, and so that you don't get an injury. But it's, you know, it doesn't have to be this, it doesn't have to be CrossFit, you know, it can be anything. It can be getting in the pool is one of the best things that we can tell anybody to do. Walking in a pool is fantastic. The water acts like graduated compression, and it's like 3 feet is like 70 mm, you know, the pressure of compression.
Yes. And I think that's such an interesting point, because there's some schools of thought that say, oh, compression, but when you're in the water, you're getting that heightened pressure up to 70 and even more. So we do have a question that came in about compression. There was a question that said, does compression affect your pain? Any panelists can speak to this. Go for it, Susie.
I just want to say, and the reason that I want to talk really fast is because after I had my surgeries, and I don't know if it was that I misunderstood my physician, but of course I had my compression. And then once I was okay to not wear my compression, that was it. I would never touch compression again for 6.5 years. But then because I found Pale Ginger Pear, I found Jamie Schwartz, and then I did I did a little interview with him, Skype, whatever. And he said, you're wearing compression. And I was and you have to understand, this is the same thing. I was in pain, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, I hate compression. And ever since my surgeries, I just don't wear them. And he's like, oh no, you need to be wearing compression, even if it's athletic compression to start. And I was like, but I hate getting in and out of it. You don't understand. Like, and he's like, I understand. I'm just telling you that if you wear it for the first 4 days and just, you'll probably love it and not want to not have it. And I actually found that to be true. And that really minimized the inflammation, the discomfort for me. So I just want to say that as somebody who, and I've been wearing it since whatever it was, like October or November or something like that. And maybe November of last year. Anyway, and it's made a huge difference for me.
That's so cool that you went all the way to Germany to get surgery and then didn't realize that the compression was such an important component. But better late than never, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I'm lipolymphedema, but he was like, oh, it'll probably all resolve. And I was like, oh, good. I never have to do all of that. That was kind of my...
Yeah. And the reason I met Patty originally was there was an organization that was being honored by Learn, which is a great resource, the Lymphatic Education and Resource Network. And so tell us about your compression story, Patty.
One of the things early on in 2007, that was one of the things they did MLD. And then when I got as much of the fluid off my legs as they could get, I was fitted for compression. And I started wearing Juzo 30, 40 grade compression knee highs. And I've been wearing them ever since. And then about, I think it was a couple of years ago now, Juzo reached out to me and they had said that they were big advocates for spreading awareness for lymphedema. And they saw my triathlon, and they wanted to support me in spreading awareness for lipedema. And so I became a brand ambassador for Juzo, and they're phenomenal. You know, they really care about what you do. They had me write a blog, a couple of blogs, and then I was like, you know, your people who write these guest blogs are so lovely. You should have us all get together. And I was thinking we could go to FDRS and, you know, present as like a panel. And they were like, that's a fantastic idea. We're going to have our symposium in New Orleans. And they had us all go there. And so it was, myself was the lipedema representative, and then there was some lymphedema representatives there. And it was amazing, you know, and they cared so much about it that they wanted their employees to see the effect that what they do has on the people who wear it. So they invited us to their headquarters in Ohio. And last July was, we went there and basically did the same presentation. And they've just been wonderful to work with.
So if you're a brand ambassador, you're a believer in compression, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do any of the workouts if I wasn't wearing compression.
And you were nodding, beautiful Cara down there, pale ginger hair, the fashionista. So tell us your story.
Yes, so I've been wearing knee-high compression. The brand that I use is Medi, and I've been wearing them since I started my whole lymphedema journey back in 2007, 2008. I actually got my first pair of knee-high compression when I was like 6 months pregnant. That's fun to learn how to put them on with the pregnancy belly. It doesn't bend, and that was a delight. But I've been wearing them steady for 12 years now. I can't imagine not wearing them. And I'm a person who hates socks. So to wear them day in and day out, like, is a huge sacrifice for me. And then since my second surgery, just the end of May, I've been wearing compression leggings, and that was another adjustment because they're really hot. And the redhead and we don't do heat well. So it was an adjustment, but again, Dr. Jamie was like, you need to wear them. You need to get yourself used to it. And I noticed that when I take them off and let them like wash and I'm waiting for them to air dry, I can feel it in my hips and my thighs, like the swelling starting back up. And they're like, oh yeah, I need to stick with this. As much as I don't want to believe that I need to, I know that I need to. And I do feel better with it on. And I'm actually going to be having like my first beach day coming up. And I'm a little concerned about how it's going to be without the leggings. I always wear my knee highs until right before I go to get in the water. And then I put them back on when I'm sitting around waiting, because I know how bad the lymphedema in my legs swell. But it'll be interesting to see how the lipedema in the thighs and hips do out of compression for like a couple hours, because I really haven't gone that long of a time period.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to also add quickly, with that question before about talking to doctors, the one good thing I think that this whole COVID pandemic have brought us is more doctors and specialists are doing virtual consults. So if you're overseas, you can talk to a specialist in California and get a diagnosis and get confirmation and feel less crazy, and then go fight with your doctor saying, look, I talked to this board certified specialist. They believe me as well. Now it's your turn to believe me.
Preach it, sister. That's awesome. I have a question for you, Cheryl, from one of our participants tonight. Is there a food intolerance test that you have seen to be the most inclusive?
That's a great question. I have limited experience with a lot of various tests. The one that I have been using is Check My Body Health, and they have plans anywhere from, I think, 250 items up to 950 items. I think it's something like that. And so they're the ones that I kind of started with. And to be honest with you, part of the reason was because it was somewhat inexpensive. So I don't know that that's necessarily, a great thing, but for me, I figured, well, why not try it? Because I could kind of afford to put this little bit of cash aside to check out the test. For it, and I know that there's a lot of questions whether hair intolerance tests are accurate or not. There can be a lot of false positives and a lot of false negatives. But for me, what I did, I took the list that they gave me and I used that as kind of a baseline. And then I tested the foods and, you know, tried to see if they did or didn't work for me from that list. And another thing to mention, because I know a lot of earlier people were saying that they were concerned about eliminating dairy because they thought that that was possibly an intolerance. If it's actually an intolerance and not an actual allergy, your body might be able to get over that food sensitivity. So that's something to think about. Within 3 to 6 months, typically, sometimes as long as a year, it's possible that the antibodies that were built up, they might be able to die off and you might be able to reintroduce that food again. So there's hope to get that dairy back in your diet again.
Yes, there were some, I took the food intolerance test. I snipped my hair. I snipped my boyfriend's hair. We sent it in and got this comprehensive list of stuff. And some of it I looked at and like you said, Kara, I'm like, do I really have to give that up? I don't know if I'm willing to do that. But I have to say, as I've tested it out, I know that I feel better if I eliminate certain things. Like I did eliminate dairy, but the almond milk works in my coffee just as well. So we have a question about lipolymphedema. And I feel for this questioner because she says it's been so hard to find resources to help that condition and to find caregivers who can help without being dismissive. However, she's recently learned about lipedema surgery. She knows Kara has gone through this surgery recently. Were you worried, Kara, that it would complicate your lymphedema at all? And are there any resources you access specifically for lipolymphedema? So I'll start with you, Kara, and anybody else, feel free to jump in.
So I was slightly worried at first that it would make the lymphedema worse. But my thought behind the risk of it was, well, I knew if I wrapped and then did compression, my lymphedema could be managed. So even if it would balloon up more when I wasn't in compression, I knew I could handle that versus the pain and being almost helpless feeling of the lipedema. So to me, the risk kind of outweighed like what could actually happen. However, when I did my consult with Dr. Jamie Schwartz, who I picked as my surgeon, he has a lymphatic sparing procedure, and the way he does it, he's very gentle. He knew I had the lymphedema. He saw me with the compression garments during my consult. We talked our game plan. He wanted to start with the front of my lower legs for how bad my ankle cuffing was, and we tackled that first. We did just the front of the legs to allow my legs to not freak out and cause the lymphedema to really overreact. And then really quickly after surgery, I was getting my legs wrapped by my physical therapist back here at home to manage the post-op swelling along with the lymphedema swelling. And as much as I hate the wrapping process, because I feel like a mummy with cement around her legs, I know that the end results are worth it. I owe my physical therapist, Megan, so much because I go in there with such a bad attitude and basically call it hell on earth, but I do love her dearly and I know the end results are worth it. We did the wrapping and I got fitted for new compression that fit the new size of my legs and have just gone through that. I recommend talking to multiple surgeons and getting a feel for who fits you and your personality and who you feel that you could trust with this life-changing event, because it really will change your life. And for me, that was Dr. Jamie. I just felt an instant connection with him and felt like he understood and was seeing me as a person versus the plastic surgeon, like boobs are this much, thighs are this much. Like I felt as a person, and that's why I chose him. And I had done multiple consults with multiple doctors. It was just the best fit for me. And he was very knowledgeable in both conditions. So I felt that it was a good fit for my safety. You can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook. I can give you whatever links or information I have. I do need to get more of that up on my actual website too, for people to be able to read and research. I'm just so bad at doing that. But it's still not that known, because a lot of people just say it's stage 4 lipedema, which it is, but it's stage 4 has become the lipolipedema because the lipedema has gotten so bad that it's causing the lymphedema. How I explained it to my son was that it's kind of like when you have a sponge that's absorbed as much as it can and there's still a puddle around it. That's kind of how your body's reacting and what is now happening.
Mm. Did you want to speak to the surgery aspect as well, Susie, or Kara?
I mean, as far as that goes, it's lymphatic sparing. That's when I got diagnosed with lipolymphedema. It's not so unmanageable as long as I manage diet, exercise, elevate. Even when I wasn't wearing compression, I was just dealing with it, even though it wasn't awesome. But I think everything that Kara said is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, not everybody chooses that path. It's a very individual thing. There was a question that came in about weight loss surgery and being recommended for that. And I've heard different schools of thought about how the lipedema condition is not responsive to the normal weight loss bariatric surgery, but I'm certainly not a physician or anything, and we're not offering any medical advice here, but it seems that it's not about the weight. And even the women I speak with, it's not about their size. It's about pain and mobility, most of all, that they want addressed. And embracing whatever size you are is really a powerful shift to make. I, of course, could go on and on. We are at 3 minutes to 8, which means we're coming up to the hour. I want to give anybody a chance to speak. I do have a question from Beth Reilersdam. How has your life changed since your surgery, Kara?
My life it's so different, which is weird to say because it's only been a few months. I have more energy than I have ever had or could ever remember having. I'm walking a ton more without pain. Before, it would have been like one day of walking and then I would have had to rest. My feet would have throbbed. My feet don't hurt. They don't swell near as bad. I can lace my shoes up fully instead of stopping like halfway through. Pants are fitting different. Everything is just different and easier. I can get in and out of my car and not hit my hip on the steering wheel, which is like a weird little thing to think about. But I realized it getting out of the car the other day. I was like, oh, I didn't hit my hip. It didn't hurt. My pain in the lipedema areas that we've addressed, the lower legs, the saddlebags, and the start of my upper thighs, the lipedema pain has stopped. Like, I just don't feel it.
Wow.
I'm hoping it doesn't flare back up, but I mean, I am 38, so there is a chance when the hormones change again that could happen. We'll address that, down the road here, but it's just been, I have more energy and more of a life, and I can't wait to see how that continues, because there's just little things that I want to be able to do without having to think about.
That's so inspirational. And I think a lot of people got hope from what you said. And your doctor gave you a script for the Lympha Press Optimal Plus that you're using now post-surgery. And is that helping to secure sort of what happened in surgery?
Yes, it's helping because part of it with being everything still kind of shut down and not safe to really go get the manual massages. This is a way for me to get the lymph fluid up and moving out of my system. Yeah. So I try to get up an hour earlier than I used to get up and do an hour in the morning before I start the day. That was a promise that I made Cam, that I would do that more. And then when I come home from work, I do at least an hour to just get my legs to decompress back down because I do have a desk job, so my feet are down a lot and I can kind of feel it in my lower legs. They're not puffing out as much, they're just getting solid.
Yeah.
Where they're not like squishy anymore. Like I can just feel the tightness. So I've been using that to get it flowing before I'm laying for sleep at night.
That's awesome. And I could do a whole show on the Optimal Plus, and I hope to have some of you back because you're trialing it. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are and to provide more answers. But we're going to do one last roundtable before we close, which is if you could give one message to our lipedema audience tonight, what would that message be? Who would like to start? I know one message. Go ahead, Susie.
The one thing I want to say more than anything else is that you're not alone, and these groups are amazing. The food intolerance group that Cheryl has, like it's set up as like modules that you can learn at your own pace, and she includes so many different studies and so many different resources and information. And then Patricia's group, Patty's group, is like incredible. You can go into that group and you can search the different types of exercise you want to do, and you can find threads where other people have shared their experiences, which I think is fantastic. And then there's the ongoing motivation, following people like Kara and other influencers in this area. You really realize how we have such a beautiful community. We have such an amazing community, and that mental health support, I feel like, is everything. I don't feel alone in battling this. If I have a crappy day, I go on Facebook to the groups, not to my regular Facebook, because quite frankly, that's not working for my mood. But the groups are providing useful information. So that's what I want to say. The support is everything, and get connected.
Beautiful. Well said. Cheryl, your turn.
I'd like to say just don't get overwhelmed. You know, it's your lipedema journey, so embrace where you are. Try to take a look at the resources that are available and try to implement what you can, but take a day at a time. And you can do it. We're all here supporting you.
That's awesome. Patty.
I would say to remember that your body is your body right now. So be happy with your body. It may not be what you want it to be. You may not have mobility that you want to have, but it's your body right now, and we can gently move forward into directions that we want to go. But when we have, hatred for our body, any kind of treatments that you're trying to do, any type of exercise that you're trying to do, it's being, counterbalanced by this negativity that you have. So be positive about what you have now, and then you work towards what you want to have.
Well said. And Miss Kara Cruz, Pale Ginger Pear, what would be your parting words to our audience tonight?
I think mine is that no matter what stage you're at, there is hope to not necessarily maybe reverse it, but we could reverse it, but to manage it. So don't think you're too far advanced. Like I said, I'm stage 4. I'm considered one of the worst stages, or the worst stage, and I'm not letting it stop me. I'm taking control back of it. It's not going to win. So embrace it. Fight for your freedom from this condition.
I have goosebumps. I am in awe of you ladies. I think you're wonderful. I think you're powerful, and you're beautiful, and you're making a difference. And I'm so grateful that you were able to join us tonight. And I'm so grateful for our audience as well. Follow these ladies. They're worth following. They will give you inspiration and direction. If we can help in any way, we would love to. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.